In this video, we hear an accounting for how Trump planned to steal the election and what does he have in store for 2025 when he gets into office, if he gets into office 2024. So in this video, NPR has chronicled very efficiently and effectively what happened with insurrection, where we are as a country, where we are now as a country, and what plans Trump and his team of people have in place and have in store for America. Let's take a listen.
The president's intent was to stay in power at all costs.
This election was stolen.
I flat out said, I swore an oath. I'm not going to break it. I'm not putting on no stinking circus.
They put their faith in Donald Trump, and he deceived them.
I don't think by any large stretch can you characterize it as bipartisan.
The Select Committee laid the path down for the Department of Justice.
Donald Trump is going to be the defendant and the candidate. It's hard to imagine how it's going to play out.
A historic day here in Washington. A federal grand jury here has indicted former President Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump is charged with 3 counts of conspiracy and 1 count of obstruction.
This is the third criminal case brought against the former president this year.
He will now head to appear in federal court for the arraignment. This was not quite the return to Washington this former president had envisioned for himself.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
I won this election by hundreds of thousands of votes. There's no way I lost Georgia. There's no way. I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes to get me a break.
Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
For the first time in American history, a president charged with crimes in office.
The major development in Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into former President Trump.
Special Counsel Jack Smith will make remarks at a news conference from the Justice Department shortly.
This is a climactic moment, certainly in this investigation.
An indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day.
Jack Smith is sort of like the central casting career federal prosecutor. He's been doing this for 20 years. He has a reputation for being thorough and methodical. He's fairly aggressive, but not reckless aggressive. He's a very formidable opponent for Trump's lawyers.
In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens.
In the middle of a presidential election, a critical moment for American democracy.
It lands us right in the middle of a presidential campaign. It is unavoidably going to be tainted with the appearance of politics at play. Obviously, that's the card that Donald Trump will play.
They waited right to the middle of an election until I became the dominant force in the polls. I got indicted over bull. I got indicted. I get indicted for saying the election was rigged.
If he's convicted, then he's, running for president as someone who's been found guilty of federal crimes.
I love that mugshot. I love that beautiful woman right there with the mugshot.
To say the stakes for that trial are high doesn't even begin to cover it, really. We often, in the media, use the phrase trial of the century for this sensational trial or that one, but really, this would be, I think, the trial of the century. Because I cannot imagine anything more important than a former president on trial, charged with trying to subvert American democracy.
Tensions are still high following the chaos at the Capitol.
The federal indictment has its roots in the aftermath of the January 6th attack.
The chaos here has shaken the U.S. Capitol and the country.
Our nation's capital under a state of emergency, under a citywide lockdown.
In Congress, there were calls to create a blue-ribbon bipartisan commission.
A 9/11-style commission to look into the causes of the attack.
A bill to create a bipartisan commission faces an uphill battle in the Senate.
What was amazing was that the Senate Republicans refused to do that. To do what Congress has done in many previous incidents of great national catastrophe or crisis or controversy, which is to create a bipartisan special committee across both chambers.
Republicans in Congress, led by Senator Mitch McConnell, wouldn't support forming a commission that might go after Trump.
Leader McConnell almost instinctively goes into damage control mode. He's not necessarily going to go out on a limb when the rest of his caucus isn't going to go with him.
In the face of Republican opposition, the Democratic Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, created a committee of her own.
Morning. With great solemnity and sadness, I'm announcing that the House will be establishing a select committee on the January 6th insurrection.
The House of Representatives today did what the Senate would not, voted to create a select committee.
It was the hope of Pelosi and the Democratic majority that they'd be able to pick off at least some Republican support, that there wouldn't be that great a pushback. But in fact, there was, and in the end, only 2 Republicans voted for the formation of that committee. And in fact, those 2 Republicans, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, were the 2 Republicans who ended up serving on the committee.
The fact that Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are the only 2 House Republicans who believe that we should know what happened on January 6th, that people should obey subpoenas from Congress, that people should provide documents when requested, and that's itself incredibly astonishing.
They would spend a year and a half examining the evidence. Tim Giphy was the chief investigator. A former U.S. attorney, Giphy led the independent review of the violence in Charlottesville in 2017 and was now taking on January 6th.
We ended up hiring, I think it was 14 or 15 former prosecutors, lawyers that have the skill set to interview witnesses, to digest a large amount of documents, and to sort of discern what's relevant and separate that from what's not. That skill set is developed largely by trying cases, by investigating cases in federal and local prosecutors' offices.
They conducted more than 1,000 interviews.
The House Select Committee is shifting into high gear, preparing to do battle with some pretty big names in the Trump world.
Reviewed millions of documents.
The House Committee probing the January 6th Capitol riot has issued 10 new subpoenas.
Thousands of hours of video evidence.
These subpoenas brings the focus to the actions of former President Donald Trump in the days and weeks leading up to the insurrection.
They're con people, they're con artists.
From the beginning, Trump denounced the committee.
The Select Committee on January, like these people are legitimate. Every one of them is a radical left hater.
The committee issued a subpoena to none other than former President Trump himself.
He refused to cooperate.
Trump suing the January 6th committee to block a subpoena for his testimony.
And while many of his aides did testify, others followed his lead.
Criminal contempt charges against former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Peter Navarro refusing to cooperate with the January 6th committee.
The committee's final report spans 692 pages. A case against Donald Trump. A blueprint for Special Counsel Jack Smith.
We saw our work as the first step in a process and not the end of the process. It's very clear that the Select Committee laid the path down for the Department of Justice.
The January 6th case that will be heard in Judge Chutkan's courtroom in Washington, D.C. has the most striking resemblance to what unspooled itself from the January 6th Committee. The basis of the indictment looks like a carbon copy of what the January 6th Committee uncovered.
A lot of the evidence that we uncovered is now in the hands of the Department of Justice. I just think all what we see now is a byproduct of the work of the January Select Committee.
Benny Thompson, A longtime Democratic congressman chaired the committee.
Benny Thompson is a Mississippi congressman, a black man who grew up during the Civil Rights era in Mississippi, during the last vestiges of Jim Crow. And saw how hard fought the franchise vote was for so many black Americans.
In January 6th, Thompson saw parallels.
Well, one of the symbols of Southern resistance to voting rights and equal opportunity was the Confederate battle flag. And to see that flag being waved by many of the protesters brought back those memories.
When he saw rioters storm the Capitol carrying the Confederate battle flag, essentially trying to take away the votes of the American people. That, I know, affected him profoundly, and certainly was a driving factor in the way that he led the Select Committee.
Thompson's committee had gathered a trove of information. The challenge, what to do with it.
The one thing that we knew was the information that we have is compelling. The thing we needed to do was tell that to the American people in a compelling way. So that's why we brought in a former president of ABC News.
Yeah, I got a call pretty much out of the blue from the January the 6th committee. They wanted a storyteller. And while they were brilliant lawyers, storytelling for a mass audience is not what they do.
To bring in a guy like this who would think outside the box really did prove to be fruitful. And it was Goldston who really began to envision this as, in a way, a kind of mini-series, that there would be, sort of 9 episodes, and that these episodes would tackle particular themes.
Attack on the Capitol. The investigation.
The first hearing was primetime television.
As the nation is about to witness a defining moment, the first hearing before the country, the results of the January 6th investigation.
This is an extraordinary moment in American history.
When it came to that first hearing, we knew how high the stakes were.
Is about to hold its first primetime hearing.
We were either gonna, make people realize that this was important, or once you've lost them, you've lost them for good.
On the evening of June 9th, 8:01 p.m., the doors opened. My heart was beating pretty fast on June 9th, and it was a real question of, is this going to work or not?
All right, everybody, here we go. 5 on the line, please.
I'm in this tiny control room right up the stairs from Cannon Caucus. And we count down to the start of the hearing. And at that point, what can you do?
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection.
We wanted to make sure that this was a presentation that would grab the audience and hold on to them. Chairman Thompson loved to say, it's got to pop.
To get it to pop, they had just the thing.
Donald Trump lost the presidential election in 2020. Don't believe me? Hear what his former Attorney General had to say about it.
No, just what I've been through. I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on
former Attorney General Bill Barr.
On December 1st.
This is the Attorney General of the United States of America. For him to come forth under oath, I think it was very powerful.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
Bill Barr, who had been hated by the left and who had been beloved by Trump all the way until December of 2020, to hear him say, mincing no words, that there was all this bull that was being perpetrated by Trump, made you realize that, okay, we're now about to walk into a portal of evidence that is in fact different than everything else.
Following Barr, shocking video.
Most of the footage we are about to play has never been seen. The Select Committee obtained it as a part of our investigation.
Hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line! We have a breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol! To the upper level!
We can't hold this, we're gonna get too many people. Look at this
We need to hold the doors of the Capitol! I need Trump support! We lost the line! We lost the line! All MPDs pull back! All MPDs pull back up to the upper deck! All MPDs pull back to the upper deck! ASAP!
In the room that moment, we had officers that had been there on January 6th. There was a real gravity that we wanted to bring to that first hearing that video really put in perspective for us there.
I don't think anyone, until that footage was shown, had really fully understood the violence of the day.
Those law enforcement personnel, here are people who are sworn to protect the Capitol, come to work on that day to do just that, and they are assaulted.
Paying special attention to the hearing, Donald Trump, who responded on his own social media platform.
The so-called rush on the Capitol was not caused by me. It was caused by a rigged and stolen election.
The committee continued laying out its evidence to the contrary.
The attack on our Capitol was not a spontaneous riot. President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack.
Vice Chair at the hearing, Liz Cheney, a lifelong Republican and rock-ribbed conservative.
Or destroy by force the government.
I chose Liz Cheney as my vice chair. She had Republican credibility in the broader sense. So you take an African American liberal and a white female conservative to lead this committee.
Liz Cheney is Republican royalty in many ways.
As you continue to look at the video, kindly smash those bells for me. The like bell, the subscribe bell, if you haven't done so as yet. Now let's get back to the video.
Liz Cheney is Republican royalty in many ways. She's the daughter of Dick Cheney, the vice president. She's very conservative. She represents Wyoming. No one would mistake her for a liberal. But she also was someone who broke very publicly with Donald Trump.
And there is no rhino in America who has thrown in her lot with the radical left more than Liz Cheney. She has gone crazy.
I will do everything I can to ensure the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office.
She's been so strong. We need to have the truth about January 6th. We need to have the truth about what happened before January 6th. We can't have Trump again. He can't be president again.
I talked to her about what was motivating her, and she said that every time she sees the video of Mike Pence being rushed to safety for fear of his life on January 6th, she saw in her mind the image of her father.
Plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
Dick Cheney, the vice president, being rushed away from his office in the White House to the bunker on 9/11.
It is one of the darkest days in America. Attacked in an act of terrorist war. Tremendously sad day. Insurrectionists have stormed the U.S. Capitol and they have been cheered on by the president.
And suddenly I got it. Suddenly I got it for her. This was what Al-Qaeda and 9/11 were to her father. To the extent that her father became really quite driven by his view of the mission to protect America after 9/11, she saw her mission the same way, to protect America from Donald Trump.
Now helping to lead the January 6th committee, Cheney was determined to lay out the case against Donald Trump.
Over multiple months, Donald Trump oversaw and coordinated a sophisticated plan to overturn the presidential election and prevent the transfer of presidential power.
In the very first hearing, she kind of laid out the theory of the case, right? The opening statement where she puts forth this multi-part plan. I think that will sound very much like Jack Smith's opening statement in the trial in March. It is a summary of how all this fits together.
In our hearings, you will see evidence of each element of this plan.
Frankly, we did win this election.
Donald Trump and his advisors knew that he had in fact lost the election. But despite this, you will see evidence that President Trump corruptly pressured state legislators and election officials to change election results.
I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
What you saw at that hearing, methodically laid out by Liz Cheney, showed that it wasn't just some sort of like random, off-the-cuff, impulsive actions on his part, but that there was in fact a strategy and a pattern and a methodology to what he was doing.
President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Pence to act illegally likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes.
Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
If I could have been a fly on the wall in the Department of Justice during that, I would certainly probably expect everybody sat up and took notice of what she said after that.
In our final hearings, you will hear how President Trump summoned a violent mob and directed them illegally to march on the United States Capitol.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
With that, the committee stands adjourned.
The hearings got the public's attention.
First primetime January 6th hearing laying the foundation for a specific case against Trump.
The House committee went into graphic detail on the results.
To put it crassly, the January 6th committee was ratings hit.
From NBC News, January 6 revelations will, quote, blow the roof off the House.
The very first one, the primetime viewing, was at 19.4 million, which was really, really remarkable.
Huge, surprisingly huge numbers last night. That's on par with events like Sunday Night Football games. There were still multiple brand new revelations last night that took us by surprise.
But for his supporters, Trump had a different story.
The Unselect Committee of Political Hacks refuses to play any of the many positive witnesses and statements.
It's a broadside. And it's not just one broadside, it is a continuous series of broadsides.
Bill Barr was a weak and frightened attorney general who was always being played and threatened by the Democrats.
It's just so relentless, it's so constant, it's so loud that in parts of MAGA America, that MAGA barrage drowns out anything else.
Warmongering and despicable human being Liz Cheney, who is hated by the...
And on the conservative airwaves, they amplified Trump's message.
Every news network in this country, but this one, faithfully surrendered its entire primetime lineup. The effect was North Korean. Every channel the same. A full-on Hollywood multimedia extravaganza
to prosecute Trump with this show trial, with this kangaroo court.
I don't think really by any large stretch can you characterize it as bipartisan. And this is, I guess, a consequence of bigger issues about the evenly divided country that we're in and extreme partisanship in the political process.
Can they show us one damn sentence in the hundreds of thousands of documents that they've collected, the 1,000 witnesses they've had, anything, anywhere that links Donald Trump to directing or ordering an attack on the Capitol building? Where is it?
If you're talking to somebody who's deep in MAGA America, they didn't pay attention to the January 6th Commission. They were told not to pay any attention to it, that whatever was going to come out, it was going to be fake or fake news. And this is the way a lot of Americans live their lives. It's not just red Americans, blue Americans as well. We live in bubbles. And this is the way millions upon millions of Americans live.
In the weeks that followed, the committee laid out the details of their case.
This morning, we'll tell the story of how Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy.
A central question: what the president knew and when he knew it.
For a long time, people who have pursued Donald Trump tripped up on the question of whether they could prove that he knew what he was doing was wrong or that he knew what he was saying was a lie. The January 6th committee got past that by demonstrating that he was told time and time again that he did not win the election. Not by Democrats, not by the media, but by his own people.
I want to start by showing a video that tells the story of what was going on in the Trump White House on election night in November of 2020.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Arizona's called. Do you remember that?
I do.
What do you remember happening where you were when Arizona was called?
There was surprise at the call.
After Fox News called Arizona for Biden, there was discussion about whether President Trump should say something and should declare victory. The consensus of almost all of his advisors was that he should not.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that.
The professionals on his campaign staff are telling him, we can't claim victory. Either, you lost, or we have to at least wait and see what's going to happen. And Trump makes a choice that he wants to listen instead to Rudy Giuliani.
Were you part of any discussions about whether the president should make any sort of speech on election night?
I spoke to the president. They may have been present, but President spoke to the president several times that night.
Rudy Giuliani's advice was very different than that of Trump's political advisors.
His personal lawyer, Giuliani, tells Trump, keep fighting. We will have a legal crusade, a political crusade to keep you in power. Trump loves the idea.
Rudy Giuliani is one of the most prominent figures in American politics in the last 25 years, who is remembered fondly for his leadership post 9/11.
But over the years, he drifted towards Donald Trump, towards being someone that would be essentially a yes man to Donald Trump and some of his worst impulses.
And on election night, Giuliani insisted Trump should fight.
The president ignores the sound advice that he's getting from Bill Stepien, from the political professionals around him, and he's listening to one voice that is telling him something different, and that's Giuliani saying, you should go out there and declare victory.
And did anybody disagree with your message?
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that. He thought I was wrong. He told me so, and that they were gonna, go in he was gonna go in a different direction.
I think the most dangerous speech that Donald Trump ever gave was not the one that he gave on January 6th. I think it's the speech that he gave at 2:30 in the morning, the night of the election.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Trump knew that the trends looked bad. Trump knew that there were hundreds of thousands of votes still to be counted. And he came out and he said, frankly, we did win the election.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay?
In the years since, Trump has claimed that he believed what he said that night.
I saw what happened. I watched that election and I thought the election was over at 10 o'clock in the evening.
But according to the committee, his claims of fraud were part of a well-established plan.
The moment when he said, frankly, I won this election, was telegraphed many, many times. And throughout the campaign of 2020, he repeatedly cast doubt on the legitimacy of the outcome, cast doubt on absentee ballots, etc.
As early as April 2020, Mr. Trump claimed that the only way he could lose an election would be as a result of fraud. The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
For the January 6th committee, it was crucial evidence of Trump's intent.
He makes numerous speeches and TV comments and TV interviews.
You're going to see corruption like you've never seen. You're going to see a rigged election. It'll be the greatest rigged election in history. It'll be the greatest fraud ever perpetrated.
It's all a big fraud.
It's a crooked deal. It's a rigged deal. New ballots are coming out that are thrown in garbage cans with the name Trump on it.
This was part of this scheme of getting his supporters sensitized to the fact that there's going to be some fraud here.
Because the only way they're going to win is by a rigged election. I really believe that.
This is a pattern for Trump. He has done this every step of the way through his career, long before politics.
My name's Donald Trump, and I'm the largest real estate developer in New York.
When The Apprentice lost an Emmy to The Amazing Race, he claimed that the Emmy contest was rigged.
Amazing Race winning an Emmy again is a total joke. The Emmys have no credibility. The Emmys are all politics. That's why The Apprentice never won.
The public is smart. They know it's a con game.
I have just called President Obama to congratulate him on his victory.
He claimed that the election was rigged in 2012 when Mitt Romney, whom he had endorsed, lost to Barack Obama.
This election is a total sham and a travesty. Reports of voting machines switching Romney votes to Obama. Let's fight like hell and stop this great and disgusting injustice.
Stolen from him.
Fox News can now project that Texas Senator Ted Cruz has won Iowa.
Ted Cruz wins the Republican contest here in Iowa.
You have tweeted that Senator Ted Cruz stole the Iowa election.
Everything about it was disgraceful. It was a fraud as far as I was concerned. And I looked at
Knowing what we know now, I think you would go back to February 1st of 2016.
It's a total voter fraud, you think of it. And actually, I came in probably first, if you think about it.
That episode was a bright red blinking light foreshadowing everything that was to come. The portrait that both prosecutors and the January 6th committee are trying to paint is that Trump knows what's going on.
And in court filings, prosecutors have said Trump's statements are evidence of the criminal conspiracy at the heart of the case.
They demonstrate the defendant's common plan of falsely blaming fraud for election results he does not like, as well as his motive, intent, and plan to obstruct the certification of the 2020 election results and illegitimately retain power.
The jury is making an evaluation of that. That's the most difficult thing to prove. Not impossible, but it is the most difficult thing to prove.
Robert Ray was an independent counsel who investigated President Bill Clinton and helped get Trump acquitted in his first Senate impeachment trial.
Our system requires that a jury of 12 unanimously, meaning all of them, all 12 of them, find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
To try to show the president's intent, the committee focused on his own statements after election night.
Privately, he admitted that Joe Biden would take over as president.
I remember maybe a week after the election was called, I popped into the Oval just to give the president the headlines and see how he was doing. And he was looking at the TV and he said, "Can you believe I lost to this effing guy?"
At the same time that President Trump was acknowledging privately that he had lost the election, he was hearing that there was no evidence of fraud or irregularities sufficient to change the outcome.
His campaign team, and this included his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, went to him after the election was declared. And they didn't just rebut the claims of voter fraud. They explained to him their analysis of why he lost. They showed him the numbers, state by state.
I made this case, I know Hope Hicks and others did to him, which was, you should kind of make this a victory lap, go around the country, talk about what you accomplished, and you're going to be in a great place in 2024.
Who was whispering in his ear what Trump wanted to hear. Trump likes the people who tell him what he wants to hear. And he picked, in effect, Rudy Giuliani in order to go down the road of challenging the election.
There is strong evidence that this was an election that in at least 3 or 4 states and possibly 10, it was stolen. Bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, and every single one of them was for Biden.
The federal indictment alleges that by the middle of November, Trump's conspiracy to overturn the election was underway.
November 14th, 2020 is an important date in the federal indictment of Donald Trump. It is the moment when Donald Trump said, Rudy Giuliani is the only one who's providing me with a plausible path forward, and I'm going to take it.
Look, you can fight it all you want. The reality is dead people voted. Over 300,000 ballots were counted in secret.
Rudy Giuliani was central to a lot of these schemes. Framing them, orchestrating them, directing other people, being in on the communications. And so once Trump made a decision to defer to Rudy Giuliani as the person who was setting the tone and giving people their talking points for what the approach was, that's when he decided to go after these nutty theories.
8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. We're checking the records of the cemeteries around Philadelphia.
During that period, Giuliani and Trump would repeat dozens of false allegations. And the committee believed they had evidence it wasn't an honest mistake.
One of the things the committee did that was critical was putting together this timeline in which they showed very clearly the president would be told one thing one day, not true, don't say that, and he would go right back out and say it the next day anyway. That's really important toward, I think, establishing intent to lie, intent to defraud.
Each ballot went 3 times. Here's ballot number 1. Here it is a second time, third time. Next ballot.
I told the president myself that these allegations about ballots run through the machine several times, it was not true.
In several counties in Georgia, there is clear evidence that tens of thousands of votes were switched from President Trump to Biden.
Well, Mr. President, we did a hand retally of all the ballots and compared that to what the machine said, and it came up with virtually the same result.
In Detroit, a vote dump came in unexpectedly. I'll tell you what's wrong. Voter fraud.
And then he raised the big vote dump in Detroit, and I said, there's no indication of fraud in Detroit.
Over 10,300 ballots in Georgia were cast by individuals who died prior to the election.
The actual number were 2. 2 people that were dead that voted.
You have Dominion, which those machines are fixed, they're rigged. You can press Trump and the vote goes to Biden.
I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines. I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations. I told them that it was crazy stuff.
Stretching the truth in a campaign ad or on a debate stage is one thing. But when you are using that lie to subvert the democratic process and to convince people that they need to overturn the election, now you're talking about conspiracy. And that's what he's charged with.
Trump wouldn't talk to the committee, but he did talk to NBC News.
The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges, that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen to a new outside group?
Because I didn't respect them.
You'd hired
lawyers, sure, but that doesn't mean, you hire them, you never met these people, you get a recommendation, they turn out to be rhinos or they turn out to be not so good. In many cases, I didn't respect them, but I did respect others. I respected many others that said the election was rigged.
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged, sure. It was my decision.
One of the allegations in the charges against Trump is that he used lies to carry out his criminal conspiracy.
The defendant's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans.
But to the president's defenders, his statements about the 2020 election, true or not, should be protected under the Constitution.
You will see Trump and those who defend him essentially using the free speech defense and saying that these are just words. And in the end, it's not a crime in America to lie to the American public, even though Donald Trump lied to the American public a lot.
This is a central area of the president's defense. He does have First Amendment rights, and particularly as president, and trying to turn words into criminal conduct is a very slippery road for the prosecution under the First Amendment. And in the event of a conviction, I can guarantee you this will be point one in the brief on appeal.
Lying to the government is not protected by the First Amendment. Obstructing justice is not protected by the First Amendment.
Ken White is a prominent criminal defense lawyer and a First Amendment expert.
And so here the government's position is going to be, we are not going after him for, what he said on the news. That's not the crime. The crime is he specifically pushed to derail specific government functions.
As they gathered their evidence, the January 6th committee returned again and again to one state, Georgia.
When Donald Trump tried to overturn the election results, he focused on just a few states. The former president had a particular obsession with Georgia.
I think that Trump chose us because Republicans did control basically every level of government. You got the House, you got the Senate, all Republican controlled, not even close. I think he thought he could come here and basically just by some kind of fiat say, okay, make it happen.
And it was in Georgia that Donald Trump received a stark warning from Gabriel Sterling, an election official.
Gabriel Sterling explicitly warned President Trump about potential violence on December 1st, 2020, more than a month before January 6th. You will see excerpts from that video repeatedly today.
Mr. President, it looks like you likely lost the state of Georgia.
Stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed. And it's not right.
Gabe Sterling called out Donald Trump. He was the first to really, as far as I remember, to really come out and say this is going to lead to violence.
We're investigating. There's always a possibility. I get it.
Gabe Sterling is not listed as some kind of a Republican in name only or some kind of a liberal Republican prior to that moment.
I've been a Republican since I was about 9, when Reagan was running for re-election. I was 9 years old when I first kind of declared myself. My mother was not very happy, but my dad was pleased. I was working campaigns in the late 80s and early 90s. So yeah, I've been around Republican politics as an operative and a volunteer since before I could drive a car. So yeah, I've been at it for a while.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, for an opening statement.
Mr. Sterling, thank you also for being here today. Following the 2020
Schiff.
election, in addition to
I remember they told me he was going to question me. I'm like, damn it. I can't stand that guy. He irritates me to death because I think he's wrong and doesn't tell the truth a lot. But I said, you know what, I'm just going to play this straight. I'm a fact witness, just answer the questions.
Donald Trump claims that there was, quote, massive voter fraud in Georgia. Mr. Sterling, that was just plain false, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Nevertheless,
I want to give some perspective for this. I was the voting system implementation manager. I was a bureaucrat of all bureaucrats, basically, at that time. No one should know who the hell I am. I just was doing my job.
Sterling was on the front line as Trump attacked the Georgia election results.
Thousands of uncounted votes discovered in Georgia counties. Big voter fraud information coming out concerning Georgia. Georgia Republicans are angry. All Republicans are angry. Get it done.
The people in Georgia are mad. They know their votes were stolen.
Georgia, of the 6 states I looked at, is a cesspool.
Georgia's probably going to be the first state I'm going to blow up, and the Secretary of State need to go with it.
Everyone must go to the capital of Georgia now. We need to see people power, and this will do it.
On the ground, tensions were mounting.
I mean, you have a whole voting population out there who still today believes that this election was stolen. And they think that, you know, some fraud happened, and that's how you end up in situations where they're threatening the election officials in Georgia.
Keep opposing the audit, and somebody in your family is going to have a very unfortunate incident. Please pray. We plan for the death of you and your family every day. I'm sorry. You and your family will be killed very slowly.
It wasn't fun, I can tell you that. We were in the mix of a radicalized lie, essentially. And it just kept on escalating.
Y'all will blow your brains out, you piece of...
The threats poured into the voicemails of election officials.
You're happy with the way it's going, because you know whose fault this is when the hits the damn fan, because you know it's coming. We're coming after you and every mother with our Second Amendment. Enemy communist sucker, you will be served lead.
It has all gone too far. All of it. It has to stop. I had no script. In fact, I didn't realize I was going to call out the president until I was literally saying the words out loud at the time. Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. This has to stop. We need you to step up, and if you're going to take a position of leadership, show some.
Now, after you made this plea to the president, did Donald Trump urge his supporters to avoid the use of violence?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, as we know, the president was aware of your speech because he tweeted about it later that day.
The president retweeted a criticism of Gabriel Sterling's press conference. So the president was aware that there were threats of violence, and he persisted in the big lie.
You have Gabriel Sterling say, people will die. This was the warning, and Donald Trump was unmoved by it. Was there any sort of a sense that maybe we had to dial down the rhetoric, that maybe this is getting out of hand, maybe this is dangerous? No.
Gabriel Sterling's warning that someone could get killed, I think that still remains true today. Because you still have the president targeting judges and law clerks and witnesses, and I think it is remarkable that no one has been physically hurt, but I think time will tell whether something does happen.
The committee plans to reveal even more evidence. Former President Trump pressured state officials to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
Rusty Bowers, the Speaker of the Arizona House and lifelong Republican, was a crucial witness to Trump's campaign of pressure on local officials.
Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers testifying today. He received numerous calls asking him to decertify the Arizona electors.
Bowers would testify about his private conversations with the president.
Going in the room, we walk down through the hall, and there's lots of people in the hallways, and then guards, and then there's a doorway, and I'm thinking, okay, how big is this room? And then I walk in the room, and I'm thinking, oh my word, this is one big room. I'm like, wow. And there's 10 million photographers all jammed together, jostling in front of us. And I'm trying to maintain composure and not run screaming off down the mall, down towards the Lincoln Memorial. But I saw Liz Cheney, and she was looking at me, and that kind of calmed me down.
I now welcome Rusty Bowers, a distinguished legislator from Arizona. Speaker Bowers, thank you for being with us today. You're the Speaker.
This is a loyal, lifelong Republican. He's a conservative who fought to get Trump reelected.
Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers, come on up here.
Rusty Bowers is just a compelling person. It's hard to talk to him and not believe him. So indicative and so powerful that he was kind of an obvious choice, frankly, for somebody that America needed to hear from directly.
After the election, you received a phone call from President Trump and Rudy Giuliani in which they discussed the result of the presidential election in Arizona. If you would, tell us about that call.
The president initially laid out the broad claim of fraud across the country. It named different states, including my own.
What was the ask during this call? He was making these allegations of fraud, but he had something or a couple things that they wanted you to do. What were those?
He said, well, we have heard by an official high up in the Republican legislature that there is a legal theory or a legal ability in Arizona that you can remove the electors of President Biden and replace them. Well, for them to say to me, yeah, we just want you to throw out those electors and put in Trump's. I'm thinking, have I gone to another planet? I mean, it's like, what? I'm not gonna do that. I mean, I wanted him to win. Okay, so what? I'm not gonna cheat. I'm not gonna cheat to win. What's that? I flat out said, you're asking me to break my oath. I swore an oath. I'm not gonna break it. Period. Not gonna break it. I said, well, if you're talking this, I gotta have the proof. I said, Rudy, do you have the names of the dead people who voted? He goes, yes. And do you have the names of the 200,000 illegals who voted in our election? Yes. I said, I want those names. And the president says, Rudy, give the man what he wants. Give him what he wants. He says, yeah, we've got him, Mr. President. I'll get him to him.
In the criminal indictment, Jack Smith saw the call as evidence of a crime.
The defendant, co-conspirator 1, asked the Arizona House Speaker to use the legislature to circumvent the process by which legitimate electors would be ascertained.
If you are calling a state official and you're asking them to nullify lawful votes and to replace them with unlawful votes, that is squarely within federal statutes regulating election conspiracy.
Not long after the call, Rudy Giuliani himself arrived in Arizona.
Did you meet with Mr. Giuliani and his associates while they were in Phoenix?
Yes, I did, sir. There was a row of people, and Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, I recognized them. And I sat down on the opposite side. I just said, did you bring me the proof? And he said, what? I said, do you remember our phone call when you said you were going to bring me the proof? And he said, oh yeah. I said, did you bring it? And he turned to Jenna Ellis and he says, do you have the proof? And she said, yeah. well, can we see it? And she leans over and fumbles through her briefcase and says, oh no, I don't have it here. It must be at the hotel room.
In this meeting or at any other later time, did anyone provide you with evidence of election fraud sufficient to affect the outcome of the presidential election in Arizona?
No one provided me ever such evidence. Giuliani is kind of frustrated with us all. He said, you know, we've got a lot of theories, we just don't have the evidence. And when I heard him say that, I said, did he just say what I thought he said? And they all looked at me like the same thing on their mind, like, whoa, you know, that, yeah, he just said that. That was like a rocket's red glare moment, like, wow, you gotta be kidding. This is the clown show. They're out hunting, they're trying to find something, and they're wanting us to participate in this, and he says that? Holy moly, we can't do this stuff, you know, it's like.
Rudy Giuliani refused to answer questions from the committee about his conversations with Bowers. Trump attorney Jenna Ellis also refused. For the January 6th committee, that meeting with Bowers was a bombshell revelation.
We have a lot of theories, but we don't have any evidence. That shows that none of this had to do with evidence or reality, right? This is all about just making stuff up in order to justify keeping Trump in power.
The phrase Giuliani uttered would become iconic, and Giuliani a central figure in Trump's indictment, listed as co-conspirator number 1.
Co-conspirator 1 responded with words to the effect of, "We don't have the evidence, but we have lots of theories."
It shows Rudy Giuliani admitting that there's no evidence for the theories they have, that these are just talking points, not backed with any fact. And that's exactly the theory of the government.
During the conversation, did he bring up the fact that you shared a similar party?
He would say, aren't we all Republicans here? I would think we would get a better reception. I mean, I would think you would listen a little more open to my suggestions, that we're all Republicans. For someone to ask me to deny my oath and just let the courts figure it out, or let somebody else punt it to someone else, is not something I will do.
What you have to understand here is that Rusty Bowers, this guy who worked for Trump, wanted Trump to be reelected in Arizona, worked for Trump's reelection, is given a choice. He can choose between his oath to the Constitution or President Trump, and he stays loyal to the Constitution. That is, in effect, the choice that he's given.
Even in the past, when there have been serious
Rusty Bowers speaks with a moral and legal clarity that's very necessary to understand.
We choose to follow the outcome of the will of the people. It's my oath. And I hope that I'll never break that. I know I'm not perfect. I'm certainly not a perfect witness. But I am a witness. And I had my say. And I wasn't trying to flower it up. Wasn't trying to be anything other than just Rusty.
Rusty Bowers is now a key witness on a central charge of the indictment.
The defendant and his co-conspirators executed a strategy to use knowing deceit in the targeted states to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function.
In their filings, Trump's lawyers have argued he is immune from prosecution because he was doing his job as president when he worked to change the election results.
The indictment is based entirely on alleged actions within the heartland of President Trump's official duties, or at the very least, within the outer perimeter of his official duties.
The former president has a motion claiming that he is immune from criminal process with regard to these charges which involve his official acts as President of the United States.
As President Trump is absolutely immune from criminal prosecution for such acts, the court should dismiss the indictment.
Donald Trump's legal team suggesting that even a president who had a political rival assassinated could still be immune from criminal prosecution.
The federal judge presiding over the case has already rejected Trump's immunity claims, saying a president is not entitled to a lifelong get-out-of-jail-free pass.
The questions being raised right now regarding presidential immunity are absolutely key to the very foundation, the very philosophical foundation of this republic. Because if you take an oath of office in the United States of America, you're swearing an oath to our system of government. And so if a president is not subject to that system of government, if he's not subject to that code of laws, we don't have quite the republic that we thought we had.
According to Supreme Court, the court thus concludes that the president is absolutely immune from criminal prosecution for conduct within his exclusive sphere of constitutional authority.
Was it Donald Trump's constitutional sphere of presidential authority when he tried to overturn the election? That is the question. Another question is, have you guys gotten enough of Trump when he served, or do you want another 4 years? Ask yourself that before you go to the polls this November.
An appeals court is now considering the question of immunity. Whatever the decision, both sides could appeal to the United States Supreme Court.
I am not telling you guys who to vote for. You got to vote your conscience. Who do you feel is going to be best for you and your family in setting agendas for the country that will impact you on your daily living? But just take into consideration what happened during the insurrection and how Donald Trump incited these people, whipped them up to storm the Capitol building. He didn't tell them to storm, but the rhetoric that he spewed incited them to do so, because he told them to come on down to the Capitol building. That was his directive. But vote your conscience. Trump already said he's only going to be a dictator for 1 day. The first day he gets in. Well, dictators are of such nature that it's not only for 1 day, it's for life. And he also said to his followers, just vote this one time and you never will have to vote again. What does that suggest to you? I know what it suggests to me. Any event, guys, vote your conscience. I'm over and out. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Don't forget to hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. Thank you for watching.